Congratulations, you made it to the 12th tutorial, guys. In this tutorial, we're going to learn some fundamentals about the display property, which we're a little bit familiar with, but we're actually going to understand what it means in this tutorial. We're also going to have some superpowers like invisibility, and we're going to learn about the div tag. What's poppin', players? In this tutorial, we're going to go over different display properties, and what we're going to learn about is block and inline. Now, we've used block a little bit in our links up here, but I didn't really explain what that was and why it made this whole thing light up. So what we're going to learn about first is that, and then we're going to get into different ways that we can display, either it being hidden or none, and why we'd want to do that. So first, what a block element is it's something that has a space above and below it, whereas an inline element has no space above and below. So for example, an inline element would be our span tag. As you can see here, the span tag isn't on a different line, it's still within the same nature, it's still in line with everything else, whereas a paragraph tag would be on a different line, and it actually adds some space above and below. So paragraphs, for example, are block elements. Span tags are inline elements, and we can change that, and that's exactly what we did with our links, because links by default are inline display types, but we changed that display type to be a block. And also another thing about block displays is that it will go as far left and as far right as possible. So that's why it expanded out our links to have the color cover everything that was available to it. So that's what makes it a block. And you're probably wondering, why is this not on a new line? Well, if we right click on this, we did have our links as being block elements, and you probably are wondering, well, why aren't our block elements on different lines? Why isn't there spacing above and below? Well, technically there are, but it's filling up all the space that's available to it, because again, it's within a list item here, and within our list item we define that as a float left and a width of 33%. So our actual inside link element, or a tag, is taking up the full width that's available. So when our link, which is inside of our list item, it is actually taking up all the space left and right that it can, and it's leaving space above and below it, if you think of it like that. But we floated everything to the left, so it doesn't actually have that space. So if we go down here within our inspector and go to where we defined our list item properties and uncheck left, you can see that these are different blocks and they're actually on different lines now. So that's kind of a definition of block. Again, we'll get more familiar with this when we're actually messing around with our CSS and trying to make things look the way that we want them to. But by default, that's kind of the definition of what a block is. It's going to take up all the width left and right as possible, and it's going to separate things on different lines. So if we just go through our page, we can see that, for example, this H2 tag is a block element because the next thing is going to be on the line below it. If we go back to inspector for H2 tag or H1 tag, and we also want to say that these are a display of inline, you can see how it changes things up and it doesn't have that space above or below. And so if we click on our image as well and we define our image property as a display, again, block, it's going to put that on a different line. But since that's also an inline element, it's going to go in line with everything else above it. And again, we can do our HR. We can see that is probably a block element, but let's just test it out. We can say display inline, and you can't really tell, but there's something there. So HR is also a block element by default. So that's kind of the difference between inline and block elements. So those are the basic displays that there are. There's also some new CSS displays such as flex, and we'll get into that in our more advanced course when we're developing our website, and we'll learn a little bit about the flex property because it's a little bit more complicated than just block or inline, and those again are the fundamentals, which this course is all about. Let's go into inspector again and mess with our span tag. So we have this span tag here. There's another display property called none. It just ripped out our span tag and it's not even there. So you're like, okay, why would I ever want to do that? And generally this happens when you're creating a form, for example, and you have some errors above our form that are display none, but when we process the form and the JavaScript goes through our page and there's errors within our form, it's going to say, hey, the JavaScript's going to turn off this property of none, and it's going to display the error for the user and be like, hey, you forgot to enter a username, or you forgot to enter your password. So a lot of times you'll be using this display none as well when we get into our full application. But there's also one other property that's similar to display none, and that's called visibility. And you can also set the visibility to be hidden. And what that's going to do is, obviously you don't see that whatever's within our span tag, but it also didn't get rid of all that extra space as well. So that's something else to keep in mind. We might be using this in the future as well. One of the reasons you'd use this is if you do have the error scenario that we were talking about previously, and you don't want to add a whole bunch of things to your page and it moves everything else on your page down and it kind of confuses the user, you might want to use a visibility of hidden, and then in JavaScript, when that error arises, you'll say visible, and that will again display the text. So that's pretty much it for the display property. I also want to go over one last thing in this tutorial. We learned about span previously. It's an inline tag that allows us to, again, modify some CSS within it. It doesn't really do anything. It's just a way for us to select that text. There's something else called a div, and a div is exactly like a span, except it's a block type display, so it's going to be on a different line. A lot of times when you look at web pages, you'll see a bunch of different divs, and that way people can keep certain areas of their web page in order, and it makes a lot of sense. Again, span is just inline if you're just doing something within a sentence and you don't want to mess up any of the text. But generally you'll see a bunch of different divs. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Learned a little bit about display, some more theory. It didn't really help our website a whole lot, but it's something that you kind of need to know as we progress in the future. So thanks again, guys, for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Keep at it, and I mean, you guys probably already can get a job at like AOL and program their website. So just keep up the encouragement and keep going, guys, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Have a great rest of your day.